So the responsibility is yours. The words landed hard, clean, like they had been rehearsed. No hesitation, no room to mishear them. I didn't look down at the table. I didn't reach for my notes. I lifted my eyes instead. Check the email. That was it. One sentence, not raised, not defensive. A pause followed, not the thoughtful kind. The kind where someone is deciding whether to ignore you. Kaylin Brooks, quality compliance. 4 years in this company. 4 years of signing off on what was tested and stopping what wasn't. And now my name sat in the middle of a recall no one wanted to own. A soft scoff broke the silence. There was nothing serious, my manager said. Already turning slightly, already moving on. If there had been a real concern, it would have been escalated. Escalated. The word people use when they want to pretend documentation doesn't count. Around the table, chairs shifted. Someone cleared their throat. Someone else avoided looking at me entirely. No one asked what the email said. No one asked when it was sent. The story was already being told, and I wasn't the one holding the pen. If you've ever watched blame get assigned before facts are checked, you know this moment. This is where the room decides who's easiest to sacrifice. I kept my hands flat on the table. That mattered. I could feel my pulse in my wrists, but I didn't give them the satisfaction of movement. I followed protocol. I said, not louder, not softer. My manager smiled the way people do when they think the discussion is over. We'll address process later, she replied. Right now, we need accountability. Accountability. Another clean word, another shield. That's when it clicked. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't a missed detail. Something had been warned about. Something had been seen. And someone had decided it was easier if that part disappeared. Before anyone could say more, the door opened. The CEO stepped in, mid-conversation, mid-blame, and looked straight at my manager. Why was the warning ignored? No one answered right away. And in that silence, I understood exactly what I was standing in the middle of, and that pretending nothing existed was no longer enough. The story you are about to hear is a fictional work created by the writing team at Revenge AITA. While the characters, company, and events are fictional, the situations are inspired by real workplace dynamics many people experience but rarely get to confront openly. This chapter begins at the moment where blame is assigned quickly and truth is expected to stay quiet. I could still see the subject line in my head. Not dramatic, not emotional, just clear. Quality concern, expedited shipment. I'd written it the same way I always did, straight to the point. No blame, no panic. I'd laid out the risk, named the skipped step, and asked for final testing before release. I'd copied operations, compliance, and the shared quality inbox, protocol. Every box checked. Across the table, my manager tapped a pen once, like punctuation. We're talking about urgency, she said, eyes moving past me. The client needed delivery. Everyone understood that. I flagged the risk, I said, calm, even, in writing. A small shrug. Nothing in that email indicated a real failure. Real? That word again. The host voice slips in, quiet, almost casual. You know that move. When someone doesn't deny the message exists, they just downgrade it until it doesn't matter. I remembered the exact line I'd used. Skipping final testing increases the likelihood of bearing failure under load. Likelihood, not certainty. Because that's how professionals write. She leaned back. If it was that serious, it should have been escalated. It was, I said. That email was the escalation. A breath. A pause. The pen stopped tapping. What I'm saying, she continued, slower now, is that hindsight makes everything sound obvious. Hindsight. As if I'd written it after the fact. As if the timestamp didn't exist. I kept my hands still. The message went out before shipment. That's not the issue, she replied, already moving away from me again. The issue is accountability. There it was, the pivot, from facts to tone, from process to posture. This is where the conversation stops being about what happened and starts being about who's convenient. I looked around the room. No one asked to see the email. No one asked who was copied. The silence wasn't confusion. It was agreement by default. I'd done what I was supposed to do. And now that was the problem. Because if the email counted, the story fell apart. And if the story fell apart, someone else would have to answer for it. I sat back and let the moment pass. Not because I'd given up, because I was starting to understand what kind of fight this was. No one looked at me after that. Not right away, not even accidentally. Papers shuffled, a chair scraped back an inch. Someone checked their phone like it had buzzed. Even though it hadn't, my manager didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Pressure situations reveal gaps, she said, eyes still forward. That's usually when oversights happen. Oversights. She let the word sit there. A few heads nodded, not in agreement, more like recognition, like they'd heard this kind of explanation before and knew how it ended. I opened my mouth, then closed it. I could feel the urge to correct her, to explain that skipping testing wasn't pressure, it was a choice. But the room had shifted. I'd missed the moment where facts still mattered. The host voice slides in, low and familiar. This is when you realize the meeting isn't about solving anything. It's about landing on a name. Quality is supposed to slow things down, she continued, finally turning toward me. That's the job. But when it doesn't, when things slip through, we have to ask why. Slip through, as if the process had holes instead of signatures. I watched one of the engineers stare hard at the table. Another colleague folded her hands like she was done being part of this. No one challenged the framing. No one said my name, but I was the only one it could be. I followed the checklist. I said, short, flat. And yet here we are, she replied. There it was again. The circle that always closes back on you. Oversight, pressure, accountability. Notice how it always sounds reasonable when blame is dressed up as concern. I felt it then. The moment I stopped being a person in the room and became a position, a buffer. Something between leadership and consequences. They weren't deciding what happened. They were deciding who could absorb it. I leaned back in my chair and said nothing else. Not because I had nothing to say, but because defending myself was starting to sound like confirmation. If the story needed someone expendable, talking wouldn't save me. Silence might. And as the conversation moved on without me, one thought stayed steady in my head, heavier than the rest. What happens when the story is already written and your name is on the last page? The door opened before anyone could finish the sentence they were in. Conversation cut off mid-breath. Chairs stopped moving. Even my manager's pen froze in her hand. The CEO stepped in without looking around, without apologizing for being late. He didn't sit. He didn't smile. His eyes went straight to the front of the table. What I need to understand, he said, is why the warning was ignored. Not who failed, not who signed off, just that. The shift was immediate. My manager answered before the question finished landing. There was no formal warning, she said. Nothing that indicated a critical failure. We were dealing with time pressure, and the host voice cuts in. Quick. Almost amused. You ever notice how some people answer fast because they're afraid of silence? The CEO didn't react. He didn't nod. He didn't interrupt. He waited, just long enough to make the rest of us uncomfortable. I felt every eye slide toward me, then away again, like looking too long might be risky. I sent the email, that was all. No explanation, no defense, no recap. The words landed softer than hers had, but they didn't disappear. My manager turned toward me, sharp. That message didn't rise to the level of he raised a hand. Just slightly. I didn't ask about levels. He said, I asked why it was ignored. Silence pressed down on the table. Someone shifted. Someone else swallowed hard. The room felt smaller, tighter, like the air had been sealed. This is the moment where everyone realizes the script just changed and no one knows the new lines yet. I'd like to see it, he continued, still calm. The warning. My manager's chair creaked as she leaned back. We can pull whatever documentation is necessary. But the priority right now is addressing the recall. We'll do both, he replied. Legal can pull the logs. That was it. No debate, no explanation. He glanced at me for the first time, not approving, not suspicious. Just measuring. Forward the email, he said. Now. I nodded once and reached for my laptop. Around the table, no one spoke. No one moved to fill the space. Because whatever came next wasn't going to be decided by who talked the loudest. And as the cursor blinked on my screen, one thought stayed with me, sharp and unavoidable. Why would someone rush to answer a question that wasn't asked of them? Legal can pull the logs. The CEO didn't look at anyone when he said it. He didn't have to. Across the table, Marissa from legal straightened, already opening her laptop. She'd been quiet the whole meeting. That kind of quiet that means someone is waiting for facts, not permission. We'll need system access, she said. Eyes on the screen, email server and document logs. My manager crossed her arms. That seems unnecessary. We're already aligned on the issue. Aligned. On whose version? The logs will tell us. The CEO replied. No edge in his voice. Just finality. The host voice slips in, low and familiar. This is usually when confidence starts cracking. Not because someone's guilty, but because data doesn't negotiate. Marissa typed. Paused. Typed again. Found it, she said. No one asked what it was. Everyone leaned in anyway. She turned her screen toward the table. Rows, timestamps, sender, recipients. There's the message, she continued. Sent prior to shipment. My manager leaned forward. That doesn't prove Marissa didn't look up. Opened 3 hours later. The room went still. Not awkward still, not polite still. The kind where sound feels like it would break something. I didn't move, I didn't nod, I didn't even breathe differently, because reacting would have turned this into a moment. And this wasn't a moment. This was a record. It was accessed from operations, Marissa added. Same day. Someone at the far end of the table muttered. It was opened. No one corrected them. My manager's mouth opened, then closed. She shifted in her seat like it suddenly didn't fit. That doesn't mean it was reviewed, she said, slower now. We get hundreds of emails. Opening isn't the same as the CEO raised his hand again. Same motion as before. Same effect. I'm not interested in assumptions, he said. Only what happened. Notice how the story changes once the facts stop cooperating. Marissa scrolled once more. There's no response logged. No follow-up. Silence filled the gap where an explanation should have been. I kept my eyes on the table, not because I was afraid to look up, but because this part didn't belong to me anymore. If the warning was read, what decision was made instead? Marissa didn't close the file. She scrolled. There are more, she said. No one asked what she meant. She kept going anyway. Similar warnings, different dates, same workflow. My manager shifted again. We're still talking about one recall. Marissa glanced up for the first time. No, we're talking about multiple warnings tied to expedited releases. I felt the air change, not dramatic, just heavier. She read off dates, weeks apart, months apart. Each one familiar, each one with my wording, my tone, my habit of keeping things clean and professional. I flagged risks, I said. Every time final testing was shortened or skipped. How many, the CEO asked. Marissa didn't hesitate. 14 warnings over the past 3 months. 12 documented objections. 8 overrides. 8. The number sat there, solid, uncomfortable. The host voice cuts in, quiet but pointed. This is the part where everyone starts realizing it wasn't bad luck. It was repetition. My manager laughed once. Short, forced. That sounds like normal operational tension. Tension doesn't leave a trail like this. Marissa replied. She turned the screen again. A column highlighted, notes, approvals, signatures. I saved everything, I said. Not because I expected this, because it kept happening. The CEO leaned back, hands folded, and these overrides were, they acknowledged. Yes, Marissa said. Each one has a corresponding approval. My manager opened her mouth, then stopped. The words didn't come this time. That's a pattern, someone else said quietly. I didn't see who, it didn't matter. Pattern. Once the word is spoken, it doesn't go away. There's a difference between missing something once and choosing not to see it over and over. The CEO nodded once. Not at me, at the table. This goes beyond a single incident, he said. We're escalating this. He looked at Marissa. Prepare a full timeline. I want the board involved. Then he looked at me. Send everything you have, all of it. I nodded. No relief, no triumph. Just the weight of knowing this was no longer about clearing my name. It was about what people had decided to ignore and how long they'd been comfortable doing it. How many warnings does it take before ignoring them becomes a choice? My manager tried to jump back in. If I could just clarify. A hand lifted at the head of the table, not sharp, not angry, just enough, not yet. That was it. She stopped talking. The floor didn't come back to her. The CEO turned toward me for the first time, like this meeting actually included me now, not as a problem. As a source, Kaylin, he said, steady. Walk us through the timeline. No title, no qualifier, just my name. I nodded once. Opened my laptop. Didn't rush. September 12th. I began. Expedite request came through operations. Final testing was marked optional. No commentary, no emotion. Same day, I continued. I sent a written warning outlining the risk if testing was skipped. Copied operations and compliance. Across the table, a few heads lowered to their screens. Someone was taking notes. 3 hours later, I said. The message was opened. There was no response. The room stayed quiet. September 15th, shipment released. September 17th, first failure reported. I paused, not for effect, because that's where the data paused too. Over the next 3 months, I went on. Similar overrides followed the same pattern. Warning, read, ignored. This is what power looks like when it stops interrupting. One of the board members leaned forward, and you documented each instance. Yes, consistently. Yes, no defense, no explanation, just answers. The CEO nodded. Thank you. My manager shifted again, but no one looked at her. Not now. Another board member spoke. We'll need a full review of decision authority, already in progress. The CEO replied. I closed my laptop. That was my part. No applause, no reaction. Just the subtle shift you feel when a room recalibrates around new information. The host voice again. Quieter this time. It's strange how fast the air changes once the right person starts listening. As the board discussed next steps, I sat back and let it happen. For the first time since this started, I wasn't trying to prove anything. I'd already done that. What happens when the person who kept records is finally asked to speak? No one argued the decision. The CEO read it from the document, not from memory. That mattered. Effective immediately, he said, eyes on the page. You're being placed on administrative leave pending review. My manager didn't respond at first. She looked around like someone might interrupt on her behalf. No one did. This isn't disciplinary, he continued. It's procedural. Procedural. The kind of word that doesn't invite debate. Marissa slid a folder across the table. Your access will be paused. HR will follow up with next steps. Paused. Follow up? Next steps. All the language that sounds calm when the ground is already gone. My manager stood too fast, chair legs scraping. This is an overreaction. The CEO didn't look up. It's documentation. That ended it. This is how it usually goes. Not with yelling, with signatures. The review started immediately. Prior approvals, expedited releases, every instance tied back to the same decision path. Names attached, dates verified. Nothing dramatic. Just a long list that couldn't be talked around. Then the CEO turned to me again. Until the review is complete, he said, quality sign-off reports directly to me. No build-up, no announcement. You'll have stop authority on all shipments, he added. Temporary, effective now. Temporary, but real. I nodded. Understood. No one clapped. No one smiled. No one said congratulations. That was fine. The room moved on to logistics, timelines, client communication, risk mitigation, all business, all clean. The host voice again, softer this time. Funny how victory looks like more work. As people filed out, my manager walked past me without a word. No apology, no glare, just absence. I stayed seated, listening as the review schedule was finalized. Every decision documented, every override traced, not punishment, correction. When the meeting ended, I closed my laptop and waited for the room to empty before standing. This wasn't about being right. It was about making sure this couldn't happen again. Is it still a victory if no one claps? The call came late that afternoon. Kaylin, the COO said. Voice careful. There's an option on the table. I waited. We can close this out quietly. No further review. No broader changes. You've been cleared. We move on. Move on. The phrase people use when they want the past sealed and the future unchanged. I didn't answer right away. The host voice slips in, low and familiar. This is the moment where they offer peace as long as nothing actually changes. I'm not interested in quiet. I said, I'm interested in stopping this. A pause. Then, what are you proposing? Written acknowledgement, I replied. Every warning requires a response in writing. 24 hours, no exceptions. And if someone overrides, they sign it. Name attached. Reason stated. That would slow things down? It would, I said. That's the point. Silence stretched. Not defensive. Calculating. The COO exhaled. You're asking to change how decisions are made? Yes. And you won't reconsider, no. Notice how this isn't about getting even. It's about closing the door behind you. He spoke again, measured. Send the language. We'll review. I sent it within minutes. Clean, direct. No emotion, just process. An hour later, the CEO replied. Approved. Effective immediately. No speech. No warning. Just a line added to the system that couldn't be erased without leaving fingerprints. The next morning, the change was live. A new field, mandatory, bright red if left blank. The kind of thing you can't skip without everyone noticing. People started asking questions. Do we really have to fill this out? Yes. Even for rush orders, especially for rush orders. No one argued, not out loud. The host voice settles in, almost satisfied. This is how prevention looks. Boring. Permanent. I closed my laptop and sat back. I didn't expose anyone. I didn't make a scene. I changed the rules so the same choice couldn't be made again. What if winning isn't about exposure, but prevention? The decision came through in writing, not a meeting, not a speech, a document with dates, signatures, and one line that mattered. My former manager's authority was permanently revoked. Access removed, approval rights reassigned. No appeal language attached. Marissa stopped by my desk with a thin folder. Oversight's been restructured, she said. Quality reports straight up, no filters. Understood. The CEO called a few minutes later. No small talk. You have final stop authority, he said. If a shipment hasn't cleared testing, it doesn't move. Period. Got it. That's all, he added. And the line went quiet. It's strange how endings don't always feel loud. Sometimes they just feel settled. The work didn't pause. Orders still came in. Deadlines still pressed. People still tried to rush. But now, when someone said, "Can we push this through?" the screen demanded a name and a reason. When someone hesitated, the system waited. A few days later, someone asked, "Do you still have all those emails?" "Yes." "Why keep them?" "Because they tell the truth," I said. And because the truth doesn't need explaining. No revenge, no forgiveness, no victory lap. Just a line that can't be crossed without leaving a mark. I didn't delete the emails, not as proof. As a reminder, some wins don't change people. They change what people are allowed to get away with. At the end of the week, I closed my laptop and stood up without checking it one more time. That felt new. Document what you know while it still matters. Not to be loud, not to be right later, but so the system can't pretend it never heard you. What would change if the system could no longer hide behind your silence?